So my name is Lester Sobel, and I'm here with
Joshua Hobgood.
and we're going to talk about military transition and waterfowl hunting. So Josh, you run a veteran nonprofit organization. So take a moment and tell me about that.
So I founded a nonprofit in 2017 called Black Dog Hunting, and it's a peer-based mentoring and counseling focused nonprofit in that veterans are a subset of our society that when they get together have this instant relatability, this familiarity because of their shared experiences. And seeing this as the nexus of an idea, I wanted to foster that through the outdoors. So we do group-based hunting, fishing, and a social program through the outdoors. We don't do solo trips, so we don't do solo hunts or solo activities. These are group-based bonding experiences. One of the first and the kind of the heart of the organization is waterfowl hunting. So we can get 6, 8 guys and gals together in a blind at one time. And some of our larger trips, they're sequestered for 3 or more days.
Okay.
So we have them, in an all-inclusive lodge. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere. They're really, everything is there for them. They have no need to leave. And the bonding happens in the lulls of these experiences. Mm-hmm. So the waterfowl hunting is great. It's exciting. But those are short blips on the radar. And I say this, I confide in people sometimes when I tell them that we're kind of tricking them to get them under the guise of this, this exorbitant experience.
Right.
But the real value is found in the lull, in the big blocks of time where they're sitting around talking. And that's where the guard drops and they really start to have these conversations about what their shared experiences are. Mm-hmm. That's where the instant relatability comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that group-based stuff, talking and stuff like that, you talked about the relatability. I think that's important, as we know, I've been on a couple of these trips with you, and it really is phenomenal, because, we all kind of show up there and we don't really know each other other than the text messages we coordinated to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, quickly seeing how these individuals interact and kind of get to know each other is truly phenomenal. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I think one of the there's several moments in these different trips or different events that we've hosted where they've been kind of light bulb moments even for myself. Mm-hmm. And Michael Schellenbach, so retired Master Guns Schellenbach, he came with us on our honey break trip, and he had observed it, and I had not necessarily observed it. Mm-hmm. I was more a part of that moment than really being able to observe it, from another perspective. But folks had started to show up at the lodge, and people would kind of put their bags down and stuff like that. And Benelli, one of our big sponsors, had all the Super Black Eagles. And one of the first things I did was I kind of got everyone's attention. I said, hey, let's go to the locker room, and we're going to do a familiarization of the weapon system, which is something that we do in the military all the time.
Right.
So Michael had noted that and said it was crazy that these guys didn't know each other at all. And one of the first experiences they had was something that was very familiar to them. All right, school circle, we're going to fam on this weapon system. Here's how you clear. Here's how you show clear. Here's how you go safe. Here's how you remove, ammunition from the weapon that you haven't expended to make the weapon safe in the blind. So these type of instant relatable experiences are exactly what you're talking about. I mean, these guys show up, off the bus. They don't know each other from Adam or Jane, and instant relatability because of our shared experiences and the way we talk to each other and stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
Cool, man. So I got a couple quotes here that I sent you that I kind of want to talk about. I've been doing research about, military transition and stuff like that for, a couple projects, and then working with you guys and kind of seeing what's transcribed on these, things that we go on. So seeing that really kind of changed me. And, I've done a lot of research into it. So I got a couple quotes here that I want to talk about and kind of get your perspective on.
Yeah.
One of the first ones that I kind of want to talk about is I don't really know how to say her name very well, but it's Casey.
Okay.
Casey Smith. She actually came up with, or during their research, talked about 3 key components of the military identity, and one of them was like individualism, or she also related that to like patriotism, and then there's professionalism, is like those voyeuristic beliefs, and then she talked about individualism, the perceived value of one's country. So, when you get together with all these guys, like, do you see elements of that coming out in these individuals?
Yeah, shared values for sure. Mm-hmm. So another one of the veterans we had, Roy had mentioned in his interview that even in civilian life, even decades after transitioning, he finds himself often associating with other military veterans. Mm-hmm. And it's because of their shared values and shared beliefs. And I think that can be said of any societal group, right? So any societal group, and we think about even subculture, even things that people would think are weird and bizarre. These folks feel very comfortable around each other, right? They open up to each other. They might not feel as comfortable outside of those social groups, but if they are, they could be peers from a certain geographical area in the country. Mm-hmm. I mean, a group of kids who grew up in the inner city of Detroit who run into each other out in San Diego, California, would feel very comfortable being around each other, potentially, because they grew up with the same experiences. Hey, do you remember, the little store on the corner, and these type of shared experiences, right? So I think that's where the instant relatability comes from also, but her values that we talk about values, mm-hmm. right? So her values that she's describing, Roy had mentioned that during his interview that, civilian life, he really finds himself around other veterans. I don't remember the point I was trying to make. Yeah.
No, I think it's really important, because I was actually helping this other lady because I had to go through the IRB process. It's the big process where I actually have to like go get permission from the college in order to like do this.
Sure.
So actually, I helped another lady who was going through that, and she was actually working with individuals who had come from Latin America and had come over here, and she actually talked about the exact same things. They had gotten together and brought them to museums and to look at art, basically from their culture. And she was like really impressed about like how well they actually grouped together, and it was like they were friends for a long time. And we see the same thing whenever we go to trips like this. We don't know each other, but sure. The very first trip that you went to with Falco, those individuals came back and were like, "Hey, how long have you guys known each other?" Like, really? You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they do that every time, everywhere we go.
Exactly. We're like, "No, we just met.
We just met like 2 minutes ago in the parking lot."
Yeah. It's really interesting, because
and they're really taken back. They don't believe it. No,
exactly.
Come on. You guys have known each other for years.
No, we just met. Literally in the parking lot. We had a school circle. It's really interesting. Like,
we talk about like the girl that you worked with, or the girl that you helped during her project, and the immigrants. I mean, that's the same thing. They have a shared memory of this experience from their country. They're in a completely new environment, and they're looking for this relatability. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they find someone with an inkling of something they're familiar with, I get it, right? They instantly gravitate to that person. They say, I'm home almost. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. So, all right, we'll go on to the next ones. So Ann Dimmers, she actually, this is a quote directly from her research that I found really interesting, and kind of get your take on this one as well. It says, veterans described 3 key challenges to returning home. 1, a lack of respect from civilians. 2, holding themselves to a higher standard than civilians. And 3, not fitting into the civilian world. So I know we've both been through transition, and we've talked with a lot of veterans about, after they transitioned out. So like, do you agree with this? And if so, like, why?
Yeah, I do in some respects. Mm-hmm. So I do, and we all have our own individual, experiences during transition. Mm-hmm. So the 3 points that she made, right? She made the point that veterans are not respected by civilians.
Right.
They hold themselves to a higher standard than civilians. And the third was
not fitting into the
they
civilian
don't
world.
fit in. So I would definitely, through my experience, I would find more personal truth in that last one, in fitting in, just because I think the environment we come from is completely different from those who did not go through that experience. Those who, when we all graduated grade school, and some of us went into the military, and some of us went into the workforce, or some of us went into college, we each have these, the collegiate environment, we each have these individual experiences, that the guys who went straight to work in an oil field or in a refinery or, some type of trade, they definitely have a different outlook on life than the folks who went straight to a collegiate experiences and then graduated with a degree, and those who went to military service and saw the world. Many of us saw the world for what it is, saw a lot of truths in the world that a lot of people at the same age are not aware of. So, 24, 25, when everyone goes to transition and we all kind of funnel back together, right? So now, veterans in the military service are transitioning back into the workforce. Those who have sat in the workforce or have been there, those from the collegiate environment are also transitioning into the workforce. We're all kind of coming together. And we all have these different outlooks and different shared experiences. Right. And it's very valid for veterans to feel that others don't understand our perspective, because it's the truth. I mean, I would hope I would be emotionally mature enough to understand that I would not have the same perspective as someone who sat the last 5 years in a trade and went through a journeyman's process to become a licensed electrician or a pipe fitter or something in the trades.
Right.
I would not try to say that I understood their experiences and in that blue collar environment and how honestly they speak to each other and what that working environment is. At the same respect, I wouldn't think that I understood the collegiate environment with someone who sat for 4 years on a college campus, who had deep ties to a specific college. I mean, you see these folks with these ties at these universities, right. Penn State or something like that. They're Penn State alumni till they die. I mean,
we do that with the military.
We do the same exact thing. So it's the same exact thing. And folks from, someone who went to Cornell would be offended if someone else tried to absorb or take that experience from them. We call it appropriate, right? So they would feel disenfranchised if someone tried to appropriate that experience from them that they had. They devoted 4 years, 5 years of their life to a university. The same way veterans feel, stolen valor and these other things, when people try to appropriate or think that they maybe understand. We appreciate you trying to understand, but there were some difficulties that many have experienced, and people cannot, if you didn't sit in those shoes, or you don't have that experience, you can't appropriate that experience from them. So I guess that third point she makes that I can actually relate more so to than the other two, and I'll talk about the other two as well. But the third point she makes about not being able to relate, right? I can get that. I can understand that. I think I'm emotionally mature enough to understand that I would not take someone else's experience, and I could understand how they could not really even understand ours. Right. But the other two were
it was lack of respect from civilians and holding them to a higher standard.
Sure. So the lack of
holding themselves
to a higher standard. So the lack of respect thing, we talked about this, how it's part of human culture. People are pretty judgmental. Yeah. In the same way that a rocket scientist working for SpaceX with a deep West Virginia holler drawl might be instantly judged based on his accent or outward appearance before you get to know how much of a subject matter expert he is. Right. I think veterans are probably judged in the same way when they first come out and say, or someone asks, hey, I noticed your tattoo, are you a military veteran? Yeah, I served in the Army, or served in the Marine Corps, or served in the Navy, or something like that. I think there's an instant, like, what would that be? Like a prejudice.
Okay.
I don't know if you know if prejudice is the right word, but there's an instant assumption of that individual.
Now, do you think that's more because these individuals are coming back from a wartime environment?
Yeah, I think so.
It would be different, individuals, coming from the 80s, where we didn't really have any conflicts, or not the large ones like we had in Afghanistan and Iraq, but these individuals who are coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq who may be having PTSD issues,
sure,
or other, anxiety, or, these things that military individuals have whenever they come back. So do you think that there's a difference nowadays than you say 30 years ago?
Yeah, just something to understand.
Okay.
I mean, I think having those experiences, again, I mean, I'm leaning hard more to that third point you made, that it's just an experience that unless you've sat in that fighting hole, unless you've smelt that jet fuel on the flight line, unless you've been in that small unit environment where you've had to depend on someone regardless of who they were. This is something that I can't remember the gentleman's book, but it was he wrote several times about his experiences in Afghanistan as an embedded reporter.
Okay.
And I think they made a small movie, Restable? No. The title was of the fighting base that they were on.
Okay.
But he had said that, one of the things that was imparted to him was my fellow, Marine or my fellow service member in this fighting position next to me, I could know that outside of this fighting position and this engagement we're in, this dude is a complete scumbag, right? Like, he's a womanizer, he drinks too much, he's shit with his finances.
Right.
Like, if the dude didn't have this, he'd probably be, in a box somewhere, because no one really gave him these life lessons.
Right.
But I tell you what, in this position, he is my brother, and I'm going to shed my blood for him in the same way that he's going to shed his blood for me. And I know to the deepest core of who I am that this person feels the same exact way. And I think when we talk about, people who don't, I don't like to keep saying civilians, right? So people who don't have that same experience of being embedded and so reliant on this tribe of people, they just don't have that same experience. So one thing that I've come to mature to is understanding that they don't have that shared experience and just letting it go. I'm 40 now. I've been out for 15 years. And one of the growth things that I've had is just letting it go. Understanding that some people will just never understand. There are a group of people that do, and those are the people that I gravitate to, obviously, right? Fellow military veterans, those are the people that I gravitate to. But then there are a whole 2/3 of our society or more that just they don't get it. And I just have to let it go. And one thing that really chapped my ass, this is, Facebook shit, which I try to stay away from, but I saw a post where someone had said something about, veterans being like needy, like that, like wanting stuff for free and all this shit. And my response was, if you want to thank a veteran for their military service and you for some reason understand truly what that means, truly what it means for them to deploy themselves and not have the freedoms that you enjoy, to serve a higher power. If you want to thank them for that, do it. If you don't, and you just want to be critical, then just leave it. Just leave it alone. I mean, like, we don't need the thanks, right? I mean, if you want to be thankful, we appreciate it, but And here's the thing is, like, I'm not being magnanimous. Like, some people, I already hear them would hear me saying that and be like, listen to that pompous fucking asshole. Like, he thinks that, like, take it or leave it. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like, you just don't understand. Like, they really just don't understand. Like, it is kind of like a take it or leave it thing. And at some point, this is military values, right? You try to be as tactful and as respectful as you can. Right. But at some point, you got to just tell the motherfucker to fuck off, right? It's like, hey, listen, here's the bottom line. Like, it is a take it or leave it at some point, and I'm going to say take it or leave it as respectfully as I can.
Right.
But I'm an American enjoying my freedoms just as much as you are, and you're free to have that opinion, and I'm free to tell you to go fuck off. Right?
It's actually interesting you mentioned that because I listened to a podcast with Nick Grimes. It was Kevin something. He's the one who actually he was the host of it. And Nick Grimes come on there, and he is actually mentioning like the Wounded Warrior program and how like he believed that program was actually kind of detrimental because of the narrative or the picture of veterans that they pushed forward. And I agree with it. You know, like I agree with it to an extent. You know, because I do believe that they've done good things for the veteran community, but yes, I do agree with them that they do push this kind of narrative of, oh, poor veteran, look how broken he is. And I definitely don't believe that veterans are broken. I think we have issues, you know, that need some help. And I definitely believe like these peer-based groups have really helped with those individuals. Like you take Austin, you know, Austin from the first Falco trip that he went on. Like during his interview, whenever I was listening to him talk about like before when he transitioned out, like the issues that he was having, like it was significant. But then he got into the trip with you guys and like it completely changed his perspective, you know, because he realized he's not alone. Like there are other individuals who feel like him, who, you know, kind of feel anxiety and stuff like that whenever they get around large groups of people and stuff like that. And, you know, we don't have that camaraderie anymore that we're kind of used to, you know, when we're living on base or working with these individuals. So,
or in a small team environment.
Exactly.
For sure,
so it's really interesting kind of like listening to those stories and kind of listening to other veterans who, you know, we don't want to be looked upon as, oh poor veteran. You know, we want to say we did a job, you know, we went to the military in order to protect America and its freedoms and, you know, all that patriotic stuff. You know, and, you know, that's kind of what we want to kind of be noticed for. Like, we did those things.
Well, and, you know, you use those words. And one thing I want to make, you know, clear to, you know, the audience who's going to listen to this is those words to people like us. And I say that because these are people that I associate with, and if they don't share these values, I probably don't associate with them. But those words are not just like, they're not just sexy words to use. I mean, those words actually mean something in the way that I grew up, in the way that it was imparted to me. And it, you know, for military veterans who share those values of service to country and served, you know, we all serve for multiple reasons, but one of those reasons being selfless service to country. I don't care about what the other reasons are. I don't care if you won't have money for college or anything, but one of those reasons was you knew you were going in the military. You knew you were volunteering for a duty that could potentially be hazardous. And at some point in your career, you might be signing a blank check. Those are the people that I find myself associating with, and the others I don't. So those shared values, you know, that's just like the heart of who we are. And I think for people that don't have those shared values, they don't understand that those words truly mean something more than simply words.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely agree. So speaking of those other things, you know, and waterfowl hunting, you know, I like Austin before, and Ryan, and I think there are like 3 or 4 other guys that we've gone on these trips with they've never been duck hunting before. And now Austin is completely immersed in duck hunting. Ryan is now a superb duck hunter in his own right.
The guy was borrowing like a camouflage shirt.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
So you got all these other individuals, which actually brings me to the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about is this quote from Susan Schroeder et al. She talks about when individuals identify with an activity, it becomes part of who they are rather than just something in which they participate. Now, over the time that, you know, I've kind of worked with you guys and, you know, I've seen that using waterfowl hunting and the identity of waterfowl hunting could be very useful for military veterans during their transition.
Sure.
Because if you look at the military side of things, and you look at waterfowl hunting, it has a lot of the same stuff. You got cold, wet, early mornings. It sucks. It's boring as hell sometimes, but yet there's this esprit de corps that happens.
Yes, in the shared memory, in the shared misery,
in the shared suck of things.
Yeah, that's right.
So like,
you're smiling at your buddy who's also cold and wet and freezing his ass off, and you're laughing at each
you're
other.
bitching, you're moaning, and so like I find that really amazing that like being able to use waterfowl hunting as like I don't know like almost like a stopgap during this military 100%. Transition. So like you started off waterfowl hunting not very long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me about your experiences, like when you first went waterfowl hunting and kind of like identifying like what it was, like, and then how did you plan on using that for what you have now?
Yeah, so again, I think the value add with waterfowl hunting, and it's core to what we do. We've filled the gaps with fishing and social events and stuff like that, but the core idea, the core light bulb for this organization was waterfowl hunting because of all of the boxes it checked. Mm-hmm. For me, I started waterfowl hunting in the season of 2017.
Okay.
So 17-18 hunting season.
5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
It was an invite. It was a small, as I say, small lake. It's a pretty good sized lake here in Virginia. It was a friend of a friend invite. But it was the first time in a long time I had an appointed place of duty at a specific time. I had to get my gear ready. I made it there. We were cold. The light wasn't up yet. We came in under the cover of darkness. We set up in the blind. I deployed my gear, made my weapon ready. The sun came up. The, targets of opportunity started to fly, and we shot. And then we laughed, and we had a fucking good time. And it was, for some reason for me, it was like this warp moment that just drew me back. I was like, what is this? Like, this experience is so relatable to me and those shared misery experiences that I remember in my military days.
Right.
That I audibly said, this is, I was in the blind with one other veteran who was the one who invited me, and then two other individuals who don't have military service. Older gentlemen from here in Virginia who the invite was through. But I audibly said out loud, there's something to this. This needs to be shared with other veterans because they would relate to this 100%.
Absolutely.
And when I started thinking about, some of these lodges that we use for the nonprofit and how it's all inclusive and it's over multiple days and how we can sequester them together and, I'm not a huge duck hunter. Yeah. I don't, there are some duck hunters that I know in kind of, dipping my toe into this world who, they're making their own calls and they, you've heard me try to blow a duck off. I got 2 wet rats in a paper bag, but, I'm not, I am in the world of waterfowl, primarily to be there for my nonprofit because of what I know it provides. And I could totally sit back in the blind with an unloaded shotgun and record or take photos or observe the healing that's taking place with these veterans when they're in these blinds together. But I think when we talk about, your specific quote and wanting to find an experience to be tied to, I think that's what Austin was looking for. One of the veterans we interviewed, in that he had separated from military service, and many veterans, and even Ryan, who's a friend of his who lives in the same area, who we dragged along with that trip. They separate from military service. They've got this experience. They're looking for something else to tie themselves to. Ryan, huge Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy. Yeah. Right. So he had this experience, but he grew up with that. His dad has been a BJJ guy, owns his own dojo or studio, and he's been doing that from a young child. Right. So that's something he grew up with. But military service was something different, and now he has a friend of his who he served with, who is now becoming attached to waterfowl hunting. And Ryan sees this as another opportunity to attach himself to another experience. And you talk about Austin's growth. Austin had got into the world of waterfowl hunting. He had shared that, before he saw that post on Facebook looking for area veterans to sign up, he was going through a pretty dark transition in a pretty dark time in his life. He had lost a couple of friends to suicide, which is really unfortunate. Yeah. But that trip had really sparked him to move forward with this new experience in his life. And I remember we reached out to, we talk about going full bore. He went out and got himself a retriever dog. Yeah. Had from scratch, learning himself, probably YouTube videos or something, taught this dog, the entire retrieval process. Now has a hunting partner, in this pet. The nonprofit, we reached out to Gunner's Kennels, got him a kennel for the dog, talked about his experience. I think these guys and girls are better are better for the experience, not only from the camaraderie, but from the potential that they take away. Don Ward, another guy, came out, did some duck hunting, outdoorsman. He has a farm in Oklahoma, and that's kind of what his life has transitioned into. But he starts hunting with us, and he realizes, I got a bunch of shit ponds on my property that's full of ducks and geese. So he makes some connections during the trip, and now those guys are hunting together. Yeah. And he's literally researching how to make bail blinds out of cow wire and all this stuff. And so giving these guys and girls another thing to attach themselves to, very beneficial.
Yeah, it definitely helps them go through, because transition is hard. So if you can kind of find something that not replaces it, because I don't think it'll ever replace it, but it's something that they can do with other veterans that makes it feel where they came from.
Sure.
And that's what I truly enjoy about it. So giving them that, I think is phenomenal.
I mean, it took me years. We want to talk about waterfowl hunting specifically. It took me years to find waterfowl hunting. 2005 to 2017. It took me over a decade to find waterfowl hunting as something another activity that I could attach myself to. We talked about before we started rolling the camera that we're like these junk beetles that go around and just collect mud balls and they build themselves up. As we go through life, that's what we are. We collect these experiences, right? And we attach ourselves to these certain experiences. And if I was a mud beetle and I ran into another mud beetle out in the world, and I said, "Hey, that rock looks like the rock I have on my back. Where'd you get that from?" Oh, we have that instant relatability, and we have that shared experience, regardless of the 80% of other rocks and mud balls we have on our back that do not relate to each other at all. Yeah. You grew up in Louisiana, I grew up in Florida. We might have some third coast relatability, but we have life experiences that are completely unrelatable outside of that one nugget that we have. That's military service, values in country, these type of things that come from military service, and the idea of selfless service in general. And now waterfowl hunting. So these are now we have these now more similarities, but I think if we can give these veterans something to hold on to, you talk about specifically during transition, right? They're transitioning from one experience, they're transitioning into another. If we can give them something as a stopgap between those two while they're figuring themselves out, I think that would be very invaluable as well. I mean, and we've tried to work with, here in Virginia, the Marine Corps base Quantico, we tried to work with their Winter Warrior program before, and maybe just had some missed opportunities. But finding a stopgap to provide them something through transition that they can hold on to in their new life. I mean, I mentioned it before, even in my interview notes, that I served in the diplomatic corps as a Marine security guard overseas. I came back to Quantico, did the separation process, and literally was on terminal leave and out working in my civilian job that I had interviewed for over the phone and got while I was in Europe. Right. So not knowing it at the time, but in retrospect, the bottom fell out for me. I was leaning on my inherent ability to get the job done. And I don't know if I learned that in military service, or maybe that's just a rough upbringing with a single mother, part of my nature. But it's just like, you got to fucking figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to find a fucking place to live. You got to figure out how far it is to your office.
Right.
Now you got to go into work, this job every day. You got to learn a new job, right? All these things I didn't know. Hey, I got to deal with an HR department. Like, where's fucking S1?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean, like, an HR department and
admin?
Yeah, what? Yeah. So I think many of us feel like the bottom falls out, but some type of activity that veterans could use in that transition would be very helpful. And I think even if the military service offered a cadre of experiences, maybe even through the VA. I mean, the VA offers education, but let's say the VA offered social programs that veterans could find a new home at. Let's say it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or let's say it's painting, or let's say it's public speaking. I mean, they could go be part of the Kiwanis Club, or they could go be a part of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio in the area, or they could go do hunting activities, and they could now, through transition, be a part of a whole new group of people, and learn have an activity that they would carry with them from military service through this transition period, and now as a subset of who they are in civilian life. I mean, you're an avid outdoorsman, so
Absolutely.
that stays with you, separate and apart from your day job, your family, like everything else you have going on up here. There's this underlying activity of being an outdoorsman, and if the VA or the military offered these type of silos, hey, pick an activity, we'll fully fund the next 4 weeks of this program for you, and if you like it, here's an incentive to help you keep going with this activity.
Right.
We have an outdoorsman focus. We have mixed martial arts focus. We have an arts focus. We have
craft beer.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. There's so many different things that I definitely don't think are looked at.
Sure.
Just simply getting in a group with individuals that can relate significantly benefits you and propels you, forward, that I don't even think we realize, because, when we get into these groups, we start talking, we start BSing, and, it's nothing for them to start describing an event or an issue that's going on in their life. And the next guy just being like, dude, I totally get that. I did the exact same thing. Hey, this is what I did. This is how I worked through it. I don't think that a lot of individuals realize how beneficial these activities are to veterans, because, a lot of times you just see, oh yeah, I went to the VA, or I went to this and they gave me a bottle of pills. Well, had they simply sent them to a group with like-minded individuals doing an activity, that right there could have significantly benefited.
You don't need the pills.
More. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that those avenues of research definitely needs to happen,
yes.
which is one of the reasons why I have been doing this, because I see the value in it and I want other people to know the value of it. So,
we've talked about it before, how even in forming the nonprofit, we circle around this nexus of an idea, but it's not that it's hard to do it, but it's an effort to nail down and concisely verbalize what it is, what the ask is.
Right.
What is the ask? Well, the ask is stop treating veterans' societal coping deficits through medication and treat it by re-engaging them in the groups that they feel they've lost. Give them back what they feel they've lost, right?
I don't think I could have said anything better.
That's what it is. I went to the VA and it's they want to give you a bunch of prescriptions. So guess what? Those prescriptions expire because I'm not taking them. But what I did sign up for are peer support groups. Mm-hmm. One, through starting this nonprofit, I saw the value in that, and I knew exactly what to ask my psychiatrist. I said, how's the medication going? Listen, to be honest, I'm not taking them. Mm-hmm. I said, I know we're in it's COVID times. I know we're in COVID. The peer-to-peer groups have kind of died off, but as soon as they start back up, that's what I want. Mm-hmm. I want to be in a peer-to-peer group. And that's the reason why, in starting the nonprofit, we have certain ground rules, right? We're not excluding veterans based on your military service, your era of service. So we have veterans from Korea, Vietnam, all the way to present serving.
Right.
that imparts a lot of value. You know, you get a familial experience based on this different generations, right? So you get the sense that you're with your grandparents, or you're with your parents, or you're with your children. Right? You have this kind of familial bonding experience. But yeah, pills to solve a social deficit is just. I agree with you. I think it's the wrong. I think it's the wrong way forward. I think, if someone's missing something, you don't try to replace it with something else.
Right.
If you're missing an arm, I don't sew a fucking goat lens onto you.
Exactly.
Right. I give you an arm, or I give you the ability to use your arm. Well, if you're missing this deep tribal connection with people you share so much with, don't substitute that with something else.
Right. A chemical thing. Absolutely.
Yes.
So Josh, I really want to thank you for coming and speaking with me today about this. Today is April 9th, 2022, and I really, really have enjoyed this conversation. Thanks, bro. Thank you very much.
Every time.
Yeah.